Uh,
feed through the. But there's nothing there. Okay, we are ready to begin with our next talk. It's Saad from CSIS, who's going to talk about banking malware. Let's give a round of applause for Saad.
Hello everyone, my name is Saad. I work at CSIS, and I'll be talking about the banking malware, and mostly talking about the banking malware as a business, because for criminals it is a business, and they are in it to make profit. So I will try and establish how the criminals start their process of running a banking malware business. So I'll go through it step by step, and kind of explain each component and how it can be built or bought. So we'll mostly be talking about 5 different components. First of all, it'll be about the code, and then the CNC infrastructure, followed by the distribution of the malware, web injects, and how the money is finally transferred through the money mules. A little bit about CSIS. We have quite a big company, and we have people from many countries, and we are generally quite cool company. So you should come work for us if you're looking for a job. And going forward, let's get to the cool part of the talk. So what is a malware? It is generally a piece of code. We have 2 parts of the malware. So there's a client code, and there's a code which runs on a server. It's basically a client plus a server model. The client is usually Windows executable, which could be x86 or x64. And I'll explain some terminology. So when a machine is infected with the malware, it's called a bot, and the server part is usually a web app written in PHP. The first level CNC server, it's called a gate, and criminals also log into their CNC server to monitor the people that they infected, and that part is called a panel or a control panel. So let's talk a little bit about the client. It's usually a Windows executable. So when somebody runs it, it generates further processes and so on. But for the sake of this talk, I'll make it very simple and say that there's one executable. You run it and it just executes. It should have certain properties for it to be a banking malware. So it should be able to infect, and that infection should be persistent. So when a computer restarts, the malware should be able to basically restart itself. And it needs to be able to communicate with the CNC server, and that CNC server, the communication it needs to be encrypted, so it can't be detected at the network level. And next we have a specific thing that differentiates the banking malware from the rest of the malware. Those are the web injects. They are a part of the code that is actually used to steal the money. And finally, the malware should be updatable, so people can so basically the criminals can update the binaries, and they can also update the configuration, and that should propagate to the whole botnet, because it's extremely important, as many security companies and police and different law enforcement agencies are working to take down the malware, and the ability for malware to be able to update itself is extremely crucial in surviving those attempts. Now let's look a little bit about the server. The server should be able to send and receive data to the bots. So bots communicate to the CNC server, and CNC server gets information from the bots, and it should also be able to send commands to the bots and make them do what the criminals want it to do. Again, this server part is used to update the configuration and binary. Now here's a screenshot of an actual panel. This is from the Zeus, and this is a fairly old screenshot, probably around 10 years old. But the concept is exactly the same. And if you're a criminal running a botnet, you would be logging into a panel like this. So you enter your username, password, and then you're inside the panel. And in there, you can see different statistics. So we can see that Here, how many people are infected in which country. So Great Britain has 32, and so on and so forth. This is one page of it. This is a different one. Here you can see a list of all the people infected. So this is the kind of view that the criminals have. On the first column, you can see the computer names of the people who are infected, followed by the version of the Zeus that they have installed on there, and the IPs and country. And at the end, you can see one column which is called kill OS. So this is an example of a command that can be sent from the panel or from the CNC infrastructure to the bot. So if a criminal wants to kill one of these machines, it would just click on kill OS and it will send a command to the bot which will actually delete the machine or kill or destroy its MBR or whatever technique that they use. Here's another screenshot that actually shows the data that is stolen by the bots and sent to the CNC server. So you can see the commands, the URLs which were browsed by the people, and it contains some data at the end which is blurred. Also, you can see the IPs of the victims and so on. So as a criminal, you of course need both the client and the server part of the things to run your business. So where can you get it? You can of course code it, but that's pretty difficult. So what they do is that they go to the dark web and basically buy it. There are many people who are selling both the panel part and the binary part of the malware. There's a different method which is also fairly common. A lot of these banking malware actually get leaked on GitHub, get leaked, and then somebody puts them on the GitHub. So you can download them, modify them, and run them, or you can just try and run them directly. Here's an example of an ad of Cronus banking malware, which is used in Wild. So somebody is selling it, and they make a nice ad on some dark website, and you can basically buy it for Bitcoins. All right. The second part. So what we established so far is that to run a banking malware infrastructure, you need binary code and you need the server code. Second part is the CNC infrastructure. So basically, in order to run a criminal empire, you really need a lot of servers. And the reason is that people keep taking them down. There's police, there's hosting providers. You can send them abuse complaints, they'll take it down. So you need to have a constant supply of them. And what do you use them for? You install control panels on them. You install the gate that I mentioned in the start. You can also host your malware binaries in that and send people links to download it from there. So for all that, you need some live CNC servers. And one other important part of general infrastructure is that it needs to be it has to have a lot of redundancy. That means that if one or two of the hosts get taken down, it should still be alive, and generally it should be alive even if all of it gets taken down except one CNC server, and the malware should be able to send the bots the new list of CNC servers and recover from there. So how do you get that? You can of course rent them from the bulletproof hosts. That is fairly expensive, but there are bulletproof hosts that actually rent you space to host your criminal infrastructure. You can of course hack the servers that are already on the internet, and then you can buy hacked servers from other hackers who generally hack servers and then sell their access on the dark web. So at this stage, you have the client code, you have the server code, and you have a place to host your server code. The next part is to distribute your malware to the potential victims. And before you can distribute it, you need to configure the malware so it can be sent to the people. So what do I mean by that? Is that each malware binary communicates with a certain CNC server. So at a minimum, you need to put the live CNC servers in there. So that means you need to update the binary on a regular basis. To avoid all this coding and compilation, there are specific software built for that. They're called builders. Here's an example of a builder. So in there you give it a configuration file by clicking the browse, and then you can give it a configuration file, and then you click the build config, so that builds the config, and then you click build order, so it will spit out an executable with the correct configuration, and then you can basically send it to potential victims. The two most common methods that are used to distribute this are exploit kits and spam emails. The exploit kits is fairly effective and a very good method, but it's of course more expensive and more difficult to do. So what is an exploit kit? Exploit kit is a software that you install on a website, and when somebody visits that website, it will detect what kind of browser software that it is running, and if there is any vulnerability in that browser, it will exploit it and install some kind of software on the website of that visitor. Criminals use this to basically install malware on the site of the visitors, and the vulnerability could be in the browser, or it could be in, for example, Flash or Java or any other plugins used by the people. And it is extremely effective because people visit normal websites and they have no idea that this was compromised and they actually got malware. There's no social engineering part of it, and that means that you can infect fairly smart people with this technique. Of course, it's hard to infect a server that many people visit, so there's pros and cons in this system. The second system is spam emails. This is much more scalable. You can basically send emails to millions and millions and millions of people, and some people will click on it and infect themselves. So this does involve social engineering. The person has to click a link on it or download an attachment from it and execute it. There are a couple of examples of spam emails. There's a zip file attached to this email, and when somebody will receive it, he has to download that zip file, unzip the malware, and run it basically to infect it himself. Now, how do you do that part as a criminal? So you can hire a spamming botnet. There are botnets with insane amount of bots in them, and they use those bots to send emails, so they can't be easily blocked. You can of course hire them, and they will do the job for you. You can use your existing victim. So if you have built a considerable size botnet yourself, you can use your existing victims to send emails to potential new victims, and this way you can grow your botnet basically. Or you can hire an exploit kit runner, as I mentioned before. There are people who actually have exploit kits already running on many servers that they hacked. So you can hire them, and they will start pushing your malware to the victims of it rather than whatever they were pushing before. So next I'll talk about the web injects. So up till this point, that's what basically all malware does. There's a client part, there's a server part, you have a place to host the server, you have clients, you have a way to distribute the malware, and now the malware is being distributed, and many people have clicked on it, and they are now infected. So you have a botnet at this stage. Now what do you do next? The ultimate goal of the people behind this business is to steal people's money. So how do they do that? They do it through a technique called web injects. And as you can guess from the name, this technique actually injects some code into the browser of a person, and that person thinks that page came from the server, but it is actually just rendered in the browser for that person, and it actually has nothing to do with the server. And how do they use that to steal money? So I'll give you one example. In Denmark, we use this thing called NimID. So in the first step, you basically enter your username and password, and when you enter that, then it asks you for a code, and then you log into your banking website. And when you need to transfer the money, you put the account number where you want to send it. Then it will ask you again for a username or password, or it will ask you for the key. So how criminals use it? Their malware, of course, has the ability to intercept the data being sent on the server. So when a user logs in, they get his username and password, and they also get one of the codes. But that code is useless because It's already been used. So when the criminal wants to transfer the money, he needs to get a different code. So he tries to start the transfer of the money, and when he is presented with one of these codes, it will inject some code into the browser, and for example, one pop-up could pop up saying that we cannot verify your identity. Can you please enter this code? And the user will enter a code thinking it comes from the bank, but it actually came from a criminal. So criminal will get that code, use it to transfer the money to his account. So this is one example of it. It differs from bank to bank and from the country to country, and that's why you need separate web inject codes for each bank. And criminals keep developing them, and they need to kind of update them on a regular basis, because banks also see these web injects and they keep updating their system, so the existing ones don't work anymore. This is an example of a Redux web inject. Here we can see that the way it works is that it finds a certain pattern on the web page and replaces it with a different pattern. So here there is this part which is called pattern modifiers, and there's a pattern cdata/form. So it will look for that on the target website and replace it with a different code, as can be seen in the replacement section. So this code has a JavaScript, and it will actually run and do whatever the criminals want to be done on the web page. Now these web injects are also fairly they're quite important, and that's why they need to be constantly updated, as I mentioned before. How do you get them? You can of course code them, but there are people who are doing it on a regular basis. They have web injects for all banks, or all the important banks, and they sell them to people who are running the malware, and then they would sometimes also provide the support, and the criminals would basically just buy it from somebody rather than developing on their own. And whenever the bank updates their defenses, criminals update their web inject, and then they use it to continue their operation. The last part of it it's called the money mules. This is the most important part of the banking malware, and it is most important because this is the bottleneck of the whole operation. If you infect 1 million people and you have access to their bank accounts, you can only transfer as much money to your accounts as you have the accounts to receive them in. The money mule is usually a one-shot bank account. So whenever somebody's money gets stolen, he notices it. He tells it to the bank, and the bank will block the money, the account where the money went. So you cannot send multiple transactions to the same account. And if you're a criminal, if you transfer money into your own account, you'll get caught very fast. So what they do is that they get bank account of somebody else that they can receive money in, and then cash it out somehow. There are many different ways that are used by criminals to get those accounts, and I'll get into a few of those shortly. One very interesting method is to buy the debit cards from somebody. So you go to a school, for example. There are people who are, let's say, 20 years old. You go to somebody and you ask him, how much money do you have in your account? He will say, I have, for example, 500 kroner. You say, I will give you 1,000 kroner if you give me your bank's debit card. And he would say, this is a really good deal because I have only 500 in my account and I'm getting 1,000 cash. And then he will give his, for example, debit card to somebody. And that person can then transfer the money from one of the accounts that he has access to, and then the money goes to that account. He will use that debit card on an ATM machine and withdraw as much money as he can. For example, I think in Denmark it's up to 15,000 kroner a day. It could be 5,000 during the night. So he can basically get 15,000 kroner this way. And then when the police will actually try and look for who did it, they will find that the student who sold his card, but not the real criminal. So this is one way to do it, but this is a fairly small, let's say, a fairly small money mule, and you can only transfer up to 15,000 in this particular case. In some other countries, the limit could be different. One other method that is also quite commonly seen is to hire these, finance manager on the on the internet. So sometimes there are spam emails being sent to people, and somebody's claiming that we are hiring a finance manager, and your job would be that we run some business, and you will get some money into your account, and then you'll have to send it to some other account, and so on. So those people will, take that job thinking that this is a real job, and what actually would be happening would be that the criminals will be sending stolen money to their personal bank account, and then they will be sending that money further to a different bank account or cashing it out and giving it away. This is also a one-time shot, so that person doesn't have a job, and once he basically cleans up one batch of money, his job is over, and police will be knocking on their door soon. You can also buy money mules, so some people provide that as a service. You can do that on a dark website. And then the last example that I have is fairly quite interesting, because it was used last year in a very big bank heist, and that is to clean it in a casino. So many of you might have heard that the Bangladesh Central Bank was got hacked, I think last year or the year before, and they lost something around $80 million. So what happened? It was done by some criminal gang. And when they had everything in place and they were ready to transfer the money, they sent a bunch of people, around 10 or more people, to Philippines, and they went to Philippines and created a bunch of bank accounts with the fake names, and it was apparently possible at that time. And then when they stole the money, they sent that money to those bank accounts, and it came there, but again, you can't basically cash them out easily, that much money, and go away. So what they did was that they went to a casino, played some games of baccarat. So there were a bunch of people. They went to a casino and used those stolen money to buy the chips, and then they used those chips to gamble. But of course, they gambled in a way that they didn't lose too much money and they didn't gain too much money. They were more into it, cleaning the money rather than winning. So at the end of the day, they managed to clean something like $60 million, and they bought the chips of it, played gambled a bit, and at the end of the day, they took those chips to the cashier, and cashier gave them clean cash, and they put it in a van and went away. And nobody's seen them ever since. Maybe there's been some latest development, but around 6 months ago, nobody had known where those people went. To conclude my talk, there is to run this whole infrastructure, there needs to be code, both client side and server side. You can code it yourself, you can buy it, and then you need to distribute the client code to different people through spam emails or through the exploit kits. You need to host the server side of the code into some stolen servers or hacked servers or some bulletproof servers. And once you have all that set up, you use web inject to gain access to the accounts of the people. And once you have access to those accounts, you can transfer the money to the money mules and somehow create a system so that the people who are receiving the money give it to you without it being traceable to you. And in the end, you get a lot of dollar, and that's basically the whole operation. My talk actually finished quite earlier than I thought, but that means we have more time for questions. So anybody has any questions, feel free to ask.
Do we have any questions? There is one.
Yes, Two just left, but he had a talk about man-in-the-middle attack on NemID, especially because it's easy. Can iframe it, and you can do a lot of things. Do you have a? Do you know he also had an article in version 2 about it and such. But how do you see NemID as a secure Danish way of putting this monopoly on payment or login? Sorry.
In my opinion, it's quite good, but that's my personal opinion, because it kind of gives everyone this idea that you need to have a second factor in order to conduct your your banking operations. And all the attacks that I know on NemID are basically active attacks. That means the user has to make a mistake in order to basically give up their credentials. I've seen many phishing kits where people are asking somebody to enter your username, your password, and then take a picture of your card and upload them, and people do that. So I mean, you can't protect against that. There's also these man-in-the-middle attacks, but they are also only possible if somebody's computer is already infected, or you have some problem in the network already, which normally there isn't. So it comes down to the fact that people make mistake to basically get compromised. And that problem, exists in all forms of authentication. So I think it's still quite better, because I've seen in many different countries people have bank accounts which has no two-factor authentication at all. So this is at least much more secure than that.
Cool. We have another question.
I'd like to correct that, because I'm not sure if you were in the talk yesterday, but he gave a lightning talk, and the problem was that the payment system for NemID, that an iframe is embedded into another page, and that basically gives the other page complete control over the NemID interface, and that's definitely a insecure design. That shouldn't be like that.
Yeah.
So that's not a user error, that's an error in the system.
That I completely agree with. That if you have to put it in an iframe, then the other, so I think that is a problem.
It was not NemID, it was the payment provider for the Dancard system we use, ePay. So
okay.
NemID actually does the full redirect with the site.
Yeah, okay.
NemID doesn't do the iframe because it's just JavaScript client that is running in the page, and which domains that should be running on, you have no idea of knowing. And so if you can just get some third-party JavaScript into one of those pages, you can phish NemID.
Okay.
So unless there are some very, very strict rules and a whitelist of which domains this should be expected on, then there's no way of knowing where it should be expected. Any gambling site, and we all know that gambling sites are also always trustworthy, but they are required to have NemID.
Yeah, I haven't done too much research on NemID, so I'm not sure if I could comment further on that.
Do we have other questions? No? Let's give a big round of applause for Saad.
Cool.